What's up guys, it's GM Max here, and today's video is all about discovering why it is that you lose games in chess. Now, I find it often people think, well, I lost because I made a silly mistake or I made some dumb blunder in the position. But you've probably noticed that blunders don't happen just in isolation, right? That there's usually some sort of cause or some other things that happen in the position as well. So here I'm going to share with you a little hack that will really help you to discover what your weaknesses are, the areas where you don't understand a position so well, so then you can work on improving on them. But before I show that, do make sure to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel for more of my Grandmaster chess improvement videos. So what I'm using right now, if you look at this screen here, is something called the Chess.com Opening Explorer. So how do we get to the Chess.com Opening Explorer? Well, let's type in chess.com. And you can then go to the chess.com homepage. And then from there, you go to this tab just on the left. And you scroll down to this one for like the loan, with the nice hat and all of that. And then you click on Explorer. And you wait for that to load. And you're going to see it says Master Games at the moment. So we want to change that to My Games. Obviously, this is for you guys having a chess.com account, which I'm guessing most of you probably already do. So in any case, once you're on your account and you're in here, then I'm going to change this from all games to Blitz, because I play a lot of unrated, and of course the bullet games are not necessarily going to give you a accurate indication of what, sort of how you're going to necessarily play those particular positions, because bullet can be a bit random. But you can see here now that I've set it to white, and so you can see how I'm scoring in different moves with the white pieces. For example, you can already see that I'm scoring better with the move 1e4, then with the move 1d4, where even though d4 is my most common move, that I score better with some others. Now, of course, the score isn't always going to tell the full story. Certainly, it's true that, maybe you just play, for instance, d4 mostly against higher rated players, and maybe you mostly play e4 against lower rated players, and that might be one reason why your score is better with one move than another. But definitely the statistics are worth keeping in mind. Also, do bear in mind that you can do this with other players as well. Like, let's say, for example, that you are preparing and you know that you're going to be playing Hikaru Nakamura, or you can look up his games and also find the weaknesses in his game by going through the different moves in a similar way to what we are going to see here with me doing my own games. So if we take d4, well, kind of the obvious way to find weaknesses is to look at, well, what are the lines where I'm not scoring the best, where I have the lowest score. And so I can see that of the main moves, the move knight f6 is the one where my opponent scored the best. And after c4, my main move, we see that, well, the move of g6 is the one where, well, we could say of the main moves where black is scoring best fall. And if we kind of continue down this main line, like what you're going to see is that if we just play the most common move for both sides in this database, then we're going to get to this position where suddenly, black's score has improved quite a bit relative to the other lines. And we can kind of conclude that this line is a little bit of a weakness in my repertoire that I do need to work on a bit. Because after castles, well, in the lines, especially with knight c6, you can see that my score has not been very good in these positions at all, with black scoring 2 out of 3 with me playing the bayonet. So it's kind of a sign that, okay, if this was the only system in my repertoire, and it was a line where I was scoring quite badly, then you kind of have two options then. Either you can work really hard on this line and really greatly improve your understanding and your knowledge of the positions to sort of fix the weakness. The other option is to say, you know what, maybe this line just doesn't suit my style. You just have thinking, okay, I've been playing this in many games, it's not really working for me, so let's play something a little bit different. And probably already when I've been going for these moves, you've probably noticed I play a lot of different moves on almost every move that have a very broad repertoire, which is not always a strength. It does mean you aren't as much of a specialist in the different positions, but the trade-off is you do get a lot more exposure to different types of positions, which can help you become a stronger player. And also kind of gives you more room to potentially target the opponent's weaknesses as well for when it comes to preparing for a game. But you can sort of see that one solution I came up with was that instead of working really hard on castles, I just replaced the line with bishop e3, and, well, you can see that I'm scoring a lot better in these lines, with 3 wins and 2 draws as such. So kind of a much better outcome in comparison just by changing the line to the Gligorich instead. And you can sort of see I play a lot of different systems, so the video would be a very long one if I went through every single line I play, like going through bishop e2 and f3. But I guess it is worth noting that, that my results against the Grunfeld after d5 are very good. We can see that I'm winning most of my games from these positions, with e4, and this being the line that scores the best of all. Granted, it's a relatively small sample size, but you can sort of see, that my results are good with quite a few different moves here, and therefore with a good performance, it means that I probably don't have to worry too much about avoiding the Grunfeld. But you can see I've played other lines, and from the statistics we can kind of surmise that I should probably stick with the move knight to c3 as my main move in this case, and probably drop this move at f3, which hasn't been scoring anywhere near as well for me in comparison. So again, you can sort of see what lines you're playing that are working well for you and what ones you should maybe change instead. Now, this can be useful for seeing lines in which you're relatively strong as well. For example, let's just say we go back to this position. We can see that of all the moves I've played quite frequently, that I've scored the best of all with knight f3. Bishop g5 technically I've scored even better with, but over a smaller sample size. So we can see that these are positions that seem to suit me very well. For example, after d5, we can see that my score with the London has also been pretty good here. Of e6 and e3, and a score of over 75% is definitely nothing to be sneezed at. So you can sort of see as well the sort of positions not just that you're struggling in, but the ones where you are performing well so you can play them more often and just continue having very good results with them. It's good for finding your strengths, the positions that you play best of all, as well as the positions where you could understand them a lot better. I could talk a lot more about the different sort of weaknesses within d4, but I guess it's also worth seeing, what about my performance in some other moves as well. Before moving on, I guess I will point out that, d5, we can see, that my score of over 85% with bishop f4. Again, we can see it's a line I'm performing very well in, and therefore, something that definitely can be worth playing more often if I want to optimize my results without needing to put in too much extra work to improve my results at 50 to 100 points. Then certainly, playing the lines where you're scoring the best and just repeating them more often is definitely a good way to do so. As a little bit of a hack there. If we take another example, let's say we see a similar concept apply of e4, where we look at the lines where I'm performing the best and the lines where I'm struggling more. Well, we can kind of see, if we look at the statistics here, that the move that my opponent seems to be scoring the best in is with the move e5. And that might be due to the fact also that when it comes to e4, e5, there's more of it, these games will be by players who are somewhat, let's say, high rated, because e5 you tend to see more either at a relatively low level or at a very high level of play, whereas the Sicilian you tend to see more, let's say, the club to master level compared to the GM level. But you can sort of see as well, after, say, knight to f3, I do have very high scores with some other moves, but I think it's because I mainly play them against very low-rated players. So if we take knight f3, we can already see again that after knight 6, we can use the score to kind of determine what lines might be the most effective. For example, we can see that my score with the Italian game is a bit better than my score with the Ruy Lopez, and we can go a bit deeper and see, for example, that after bishop c5, that I tend to do better in the lines where I go c3, and then go for a direct d4. You can see that I'm scoring extremely well in these positions, playing this archbishop attack with e5, and going for this more direct play. Whereas by comparison, in the lines where I played d3, we can see that my score is nowhere near as good. There are a lot of transpositions to these lines as well, but we can kind of take, let's say, after d6 and castles. Again, we see that, black is getting a very good score in these games, and so therefore, if I was wanting to play this kind of modern Italian as white, it's definitely something I would need to work on quite a lot in order to sort of overcome this, let's say, weakness or this gap in my understanding. But we could also say, well, just play d4, the line that you're already scoring very well with, and that's just going to give you better results in the short term if one doesn't do a whole lot more work to master the positions. And then you also can see a similar question, if we take the Ruy Lopez, do I perform better? Which lines of Ruy Lopez do I perform better in? We see I do quite well with bishop to c6, but we also see there aren't really that many games to go off of here. So it's not enough to necessarily determine this, let's say, the best way to play, but, we can see that, my score with d3 is 0 out of 3. Whereas my score with castle short is definitely a lot better. So it already tells you, well, probably I should keep playing castles and give up the move d3, because it seems like the more direct lines where I go rook e1 and d4 kind of suit my style probably a lot better than the slower lines with d3, just based on these results. And also if we look at other lines, again, we can sort of see when it looks at statistics, it can help you to determine, okay, what line should I keep playing, and what line should I maybe give up and replace with something else. Where if we take the Sicilian, for example, let's say I'm curious to know, well, do I perform better with open Sicilians or with anti-Sicilians? And if it's anti-Sicilians, which anti-Sicilians kind of work better for me? You can see that, for example, my score with knight c3 is very close to 100%. I do very well with this bishop b5 line with 100% score. So therefore, a line I should probably keep playing because I just have an incredibly good results. Also against a lot of strong players as well playing in this kind of style. But if we take the move knight f3, which I've played a lot more, well, in that case, we take d6, we can kind of see that, well, my results with bishop b5 are slightly better on average than with the move of d4. Of course, there are a lot of options within these different lines, but it can give a sign that maybe the bishop b5 move might suit me a little bit better in general as my main repertoire choice in terms of my style and my existing understanding. It also might mean that maybe there are certain lines I play within the open Sicilian where maybe I just score a lot better than some other lines. For example, if knight c3 and a6, well, we can sort of see that I do very well with bishop to e3, but with other moves I've had quite mixed results as such. So therefore I should probably just stick with playing the main line and, just have very good results here. We can see my one loss was where they played g6, which objectively is not a particularly good move here. So you might also say, well, it's just can have better results maybe playing the open Sicilian, but just playing it with a very narrow repertoire rather than just playing random moves on move 6 as we saw here with my various experimenting with different moves at this point. It's kind of interesting I haven't played bishop c4 yet or g3, so that's another thing I could also explore, but I guess, yeah, it shows there are a lot of directions you can take this in terms of how you can improve your chess understanding. Again, you could also do things with the other moves, like, say, knight to c6. Well, we can see, yeah, that my results with bishop to b5, again, somewhat better than with d4, so it can be useful to know this data, to know what lines you just play the best of all, and what ones you might want to specialize in that you're already good at and just want to take to the next level. It's probably enough talking about the white lines. I mean, I guess in theory I could go into lines like knight f3, c4, and b3 and explore my results there. One thing you'll notice, for example, is that my results with the king's attack with g3 are not as good as a lot of the other lines, whereas I tend to score really well with the reti. So again, it gives a hint that, okay, maybe if I want to play knight 3, I should play the reti with c4. Or if I want to go e3 or g3, I should probably learn those positions a lot more deeply to make sure I really understand them better than my opponents. But let's see how this works for the black repertoire, because as you can see, my score with white looks quite impressive, but if we look at the black games, the score is going to be a little bit lower for me by comparison, but actually not much lower. It turns out my score still holds up surprisingly well with the black pieces as well. And actually, it's also worth pointing out you can go to settings, just as you can see here, just next to the rook on h8. And then you can actually flip the board so you can see it from black's perspective. So that's useful when you're preparing the black lines. So let's say we have e4. One question I might have is, I know there are a lot of players who maybe feel a bit indecisive when it comes to what opening should I play. And they say, oh, maybe I could play, I don't know, the Najdorf, or maybe I could play Berlin, or what about the French? Oh, Caro-Kann looks interesting. What about the modern? And they have so many choices, they just get overwhelmed and just can't really make a decision. Or they just sort of chop and change between opening so many times, so they just don't really get the that improvement. Maybe that's happened to you as well before, right? Well, a very simple solution to this, and of course not the only solution, but I think a very practical one, is just look at the lines where you're performing the best and just play those ones is a short-term fix. Or if you are going to learn a new system, you can certainly look in terms of, okay, what are the lines where I haven't been scoring so well, so that I can work harder on those and turn that weakness into one of my strengths. Now we can see here that actually my best scoring moves is actually the Scandinavian with d5, but I know that that's mainly because I play this a lot against much lower rated players, like 1600 and below. It's kind of my throwaway system there. And I play a lot of unrated games, and that's why the score is very inflated after knight f6, because I almost always am playing this Portuguese against much lower rated players. If I played this against a higher rated player, it just wouldn't work as well. So that's how I guess I noticed from my own data that, d5, even though I have a very good score of it, it actually doesn't suit my style well whatsoever, is what I kind of found, unless I'm playing some throwaway game. But if we take some of my more common moves, we can see that I've played the move c5 most of all. And again, after knight 3, if you're thinking, well, what Sicilian maybe should I play, then certainly the statistics can sort of help to determine that. Where, for example, I take my most common move in knight c6, it's true my score is a little bit worse than after some other moves, but that's because I played a lot against mainly, relatively high-rated players as my main system. But yeah, if we look here, we see that, for instance, after d4, that, in the lines like the Accelerated Dragon, I'm actually scoring very, very well. Well, this is one of my best scoring systems, and it's kind of nice that, against the Maroczy Bind, which is thought to be the main problem system for black, that, I'm still getting a very heavy score. Like, for example, after knight f6, we can see, after d6 or knight takes d4, I've got scores of around 80% in these lines, which obviously is like way above the norm for even my other games, let alone in Blitz in general. So quite an effective system. But one line that's definitely more annoying, as we can see, is the Rossolimo with bishop b5. And I've actually mentioned before, like in different like blog posts and videos, that the Rossolimo is a system that has been very annoying for me in the past. And you can see like I've tried a lot of different moves, but mostly playing the move at g6 as such. But I can see that this sort of an area where definitely like my understanding is not as strong as in a lot of other lines, as is borne out by the results. That, for example, moves like castles and move rook e1 is one line that's given me a lot of headaches in the past. And even though my score with e5 is still quite reasonable, it's definitely a line I can certainly learn a lot deeper and certainly play a lot better in general. And also, other moves as well, like even c3, knight c3. Okay, my score is better in these moves, but still we can kind of see that, that these lines, the white scoring better here than in a lot of the other systems in my repertoire. And also, if we take bishop c6 again, we can sort of see, after bc6, that there are certain moves I play that I do better with than others. So after rook e1, we see that, that my results with knight f6 and queen c7 are kind of better than with knight h6. Though merely this is a kind of small sample size, just 3 to 4 games for each move. So again, it's not necessarily enough data to draw very powerful conclusions. Probably need to play more games in each position to really establish, okay, like which move is really the best suited. But again, it can give an idea that, okay, I'm doing very well with these other moves, so maybe I should just keep playing them and have very good results with them, as it were. So anyway, that sort of shows how you can break down the different sort of ideas. And also we do take some other lines. We can see, that with some of these less common moves like g6 and knight f6, I am scoring very well. And actually, knight f6 is maybe a move that I should play more often, because actually a lot of my wins here are actually against players who are not so much lower rated than me, or even players around my rating. Like the fact that I'm scoring 100% against the main line of e5 is certainly a very good sign here. Whereas after knight c6, I have a lot of different ways to transpose back to other Sicilians I have experience with. So again, a pretty good outcome, I think, from Black's perspective, and a sign that maybe this is a system that I should consider playing more frequently. In any case, if we take, like, let's say an open Sicilian, because I haven't really talked that much about the open Sicilian type positions, but if we were to give an example of, let's say, the knight off, again, it can be useful to see, okay, what are the lines of the knight off where I'm sort of struggling the most in my games. And we can sort of see that, of all the different moves, white, the move f3, it's the one where white's scoring the best, but when you are looking at this, it's good to keep in mind different transpositions as well. Because if we take the move e5, what we're going to see is after bishop e6 and bishop e3, that we've actually transposed back into 6 bishop to e3 territory, which is where we'd more often get the position. Well, after h5, I've only played 2 games from this position, so not really enough to draw big conclusions at this stage. Like if we take the move bishop e3, then you can see that I've more often played this move knight g4 than e5 in my games. So anyway, I guess, it's still good data to see, the lines where I'm doing quite well, and others that might need a little bit more work as such. But you can see that in general, like for a lot of these lines, I just need a bit more data to kind of go off on. Although the fact that white's scoring better with bishop g5 than the other lines does suggest this is a line I probably should put some more work into, because, you can see white's scoring 50%, and I'm mostly playing lower rated players in these games. So definitely something I should put more work into if I want to really master these positions based on the statistics. I guess if you're sort of comparing the different moves, like, I know I talked a lot about the Sicilian, because that's why I had in, let's say, how many games? Like, in nearly 50% of my games, I went for the Sicilian. And actually, that's one thing you're going to notice, like, if you look at the repertoires of professional players, that they'll sort of have one move usually, like, let's say, whether it's with white 1e4 or with black, one move against e4, like c5, that they're going to play in 50% of their games, like, as their specialization. And then these professional players, often for the other 50% of games, will just play different moves, either just to have a little bit of variety, get a different type of position, or even just to, let's say, target the opponent's weakness, or even just to perhaps avoid preparation if they suspect that the opponent's prepared something a bit nasty against their main repertoire, or a bit unpleasant. So for that reason, like, if we look at other moves, we can see that, if we take e5, we can see that in general, my results in these lines have been pretty good, but that actually, I used to score quite badly against bishop c4, but I can see that recently my results have been a lot better in these lines, probably because of me putting a lot of work into these positions. But I can see that the move d4 is one that I have had a few challenges in dealing with the Scotch, where you see that white is scoring close to 50% of these games, so it does mean it is a weakness that if I wanted to play this way as black, then I should definitely work on these positions. We can see after knight f6 that, knight c6 that, white even has a plus score in the games against me in this line. So definitely an area where, I would definitely want to work a lot deeper on these positions to make sure that I know what I'm doing. And you can see from my statistics that probably the knight b6 move might suit me better than bishop to a6. But again, it's not a large sample of games, so perhaps more games would be needed in order to draw a final conclusion. I mean, you could also decide, well, I don't really want to enter those sharp lines, and so a move like bishop c5 or queen f6 that I've also played in some games might therefore be a better fit with some extra work in the put into these positions. So anyway, that sort of shows, I guess, how I sort of broke down with e4. Like, because I score well with some other moves like c6 and e6, but yeah, it's not the... Well, I don't think that's really the right place. I go deep into every single move I played. But in any case, we take like d4 or... well, after d4, you can see that the main weapon I've sort of been playing, if we look at the statistics, is that I've played the move c5 a bit more often than the more common moves in practice of e6 and g6. And we can see that my results with the Benko have generally been pretty good. Although in some recent games, I've actually found it quite hard to actually get good positions. I noticed the players in the last 6 months or so have definitely been a lot better prepared for the Benko than they were previously. So, now I've been playing like both these different moves. But if we sort of go down the lines, we'll see that there are some annoying moves I've faced. Like, for example, I know that a7 is a move that I've lost to a lot of times on Chess24. Of course, it doesn't show here because this is chess.com. But yeah, we can sort of see, if let's say we look at other moves, we can see that, well, with the Benko lines, I do seem to understand better than lines such as, for example, e6, where we can see that, for example, my results against the Catalan with g3, or at knight f3, d5, and g3, that, white has been scoring fairly well in the games against me. And again, part of that is probably because of the fact that, a lot of the people who play the Catalan against me, most of them are relatively higher rated players compared to who I usually face, or who I'd face in unrated games. But again, we can still draw some useful conclusions. For example, that I should probably go bishop to e7, that this line that scores best for me. And even when we factor in transpositions by playing out these moves, well, we can see that I have good results with c6 and even better results with d takes c4. And that this line with c6 is scoring 100% for me over a good sample of games. So therefore, it's probably a line that suits my style quite well and that I should probably play a lot more often than I have been, in fact. Now, one question we can also consider is, well, Max, what if they play the move knight f3? Because you probably notice that, white's scoring better with knight f3 in my games than with a lot of other moves. And you can sort of see, that in this case, I've actually made some changes to my repertoire, where I realized that, while they were using knight f3 Kairos as a way to avoid things like my Benko. So I realized that, therefore, playing c5 would be a kind of line that would fit well with my repertoire. If they go e4, it just transposes to my main defensive e4 on the Sicilian. If they go for a King's Indian attack, then I have these options like knight c6 and... Because I've tried a whole lot of move different setups and had pretty good results with most of them in general. But if they do play c4 and go for a symmetrical English, again, it is worth keeping in mind that you could get this position via one c4 move order as well. And we can see that I've scored quite well with a lot of different moves here. For example, I've done quite well with the move g6, even though g6 is not, let's say, objectively the best move, because it allows white to go back into a Maroczy bind, as actually happened in some games with e4 and this sort of thing. Well, you may recall that, that the Maroczy bind was one of my best scoring systems for black, and so that's one reason where you could kind of use the move orders and how I was able to, get very good results basically by, move ordering in a position that I was scoring very well with as such, and kind of using my good understanding positions to my advantage. But you can see there are other things I played as well, like, for example, knight f6. We can see that after knight c6, that, I had quite good results with e6, where, if we include g3, just to sort of factor in the transposition to a normal hedgehog. Well, we can see that even with more games being played from the transposition, then my results still very good in these positions. That, probably if I was going to do more work on one line, probably I should work a bit more on the lines with d4 and queen d4, where white at least has won some games against me. But in general, we can see, that's still a pretty decent scoring line for me. And so, it sort of says, if you're going to face the knight f3, I should probably go c5 and play some fianchetto system in the symmetrical English, because that seems to be where I have the best results in general. Okay, I could go a lot deeper. Obviously, this is kind of scratching the surface. There are a lot of other lines I've played in a lot of games I didn't cover here. Things like d4, d5 I didn't really get into, for example, and of course a whole Nimzo would be a whole other story. But hopefully this video helped you to really understand how you can kind of diagnose your own weaknesses by just looking at your games. And because with the online games, the beauty of it is that you have a lot more data compared to, let's say, classical games for most people. Because classical tournaments, well, you only can play them every so often and, take quite a bit of time just to play a small number of games. Whereas with online Blitz, well, it's very easy to play a lot of games and get that data you need to determine, well, what lines do I understand really well and perhaps should play more often. A lot of lines are maybe a bit of a weakness in my repertoire that either I should stop playing or that I should, take the time and energy to learn much more deeply. So guys, if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to smash that like button if you enjoyed the video, subscribe to my channel, and yeah, with that being said, good luck with, diagnosing your own weaknesses, improving your play, finding the weapons that work best for you based on your statistics for your games, and I will see you in the next video.